Can everyone hear me? Oh, yeah. I'm turning on my phone because the folks that I work with, actually this film is made through a company called KPGR Films. I have two companies. KPGR Films is my partnership with Karen Pritzker, a Connecticut philanthropist who's long been involved in supporting children's wellness. We did a film about dyslexia together that went on HBO in 2012, and we've decided to stick with this partnership and continue to make films. So Karen was the one that sent me the original Felitti-Anda ACEs study. So my first encounter with the ACEs story was just a dry report. And I actually didn't initially, I was like, this seems fringy to me. I don't, and so but we looked into it and realized it was peer-reviewed and many times over. And so then we decided, wow, this is important information. And I'm sorry, I'm not really stalling, but the reason, what I'm telling you right now is that she doesn't believe me that people show up for the film the way they do. So, here we go, folks. Smile. Picture says 1,000 words. All right, and so that's my way of saying thank you for coming out. How many of you work with either San Mar or Bester? Could you raise your hands? You guys are awesome. I spent a couple of years traveling around the country talking to various organizations and individuals that work for the better of children and have come to appreciate how hard the work is and what it really takes. And it's not easy work, and a lot of times it's 2 steps forward, 1 back, or maybe even 2 back. So to hang in there and do this important work on a daily basis, way above my pay grade. So I just want to say thank you for all the good work that you do. So as I was saying, so Karen and I, we formed this partnership, and we started to make Resilience. And I ran into trouble pretty quickly making Resilience because I just couldn't, I was so stuck on the science of the impact of toxic stress on children. And I just began to feel like this is just bad news. Do I really want to make a film that says, we all know that things are really bad for kids when they have toxic home environments and they're subjected to chronic stress and physical, sexual, emotional abuse, deprivations. I mean, who doesn't know that that's terrible, right, for kids? Everybody with half a brain knows that that's just not good. Now I'm going to show you the science. This just shows you exactly how bad it is and that it's a biological, not just psychological and emotional. And that's heavy. And so, and I remember talking to somebody at a to be unnamed Ivy League college, university, actually, and the attitude was, we need a societal shift. And I said, but what about all the kids and teens out there right now? It's too late. We need a societal shift. I'm like, whoa, that's too high of an ivy tower for me. So I took some time off and tried to look at who's actually doing things, who's actually on the ground, who's incorporating this important science into how they're interacting with kids and teens. So you've seen this films, and I know that a lot of you are really already, how many of you feel you really do understand the ACEs concept and it's in your brain pretty comfortably? Could you raise your hands? So, I mean, there's really, I don't need to elaborate on that, and the film tries to present this stuff in a way that's coherent for people that haven't learned about it yet. So what I'm going to focus on initially today is this idea that I'm sure you all know, and particularly San Mar and this more recent Bester project, that it takes a community and that you can't just sort of focus on one little slice of the public sector and think that if you just get teachers doing this, or if you just get pediatricians doing this, or if we can just get the legislature to do this, all these things, it has to be broadly understood across the public sectors. People need to be using the same vocabulary. So when you use the phrase toxic stress, or you say, and I'm not a proponent, I don't advocate specifically, what I like about the ACEs survey is that it gives you a number and you don't have to go into details. But if you know a kid has a 5 or a 6 or an 8, that's significant. And so, the vocabulary that you can use to share across juvenile justice, pediatrics, education, law enforcement, it's really important that all this come together. So, having said that, thought maybe, has anyone in here seen Paper Tigers by chance? Jesus, you guys want to come home with me? Come on back to. I'm going to show you the trailer for Paper Tigers. I'm going to talk about that next, and then I'm going to come back to resilience. So in the back of the room, there's probably a young kid who knows technology, and he's going to show the trailer hopefully pretty soon. And then in the meanwhile, maybe I'll take another. Oh no, I'll take another.
It's not that I'm.
In every school in America, walking down every street in America, there are the kids that get labeled. Get rid of them. They're nothing but trouble. Lincoln sits right in the heart of the most assaults, gang activity, truancy.
I did hear that it was the worst school you could ever go to.
Kids had knives, the fights, absolute chaos.
He pissed me off and I threw a chair at him. And I told him I was going to kill him.
All of them were methed out.
I was invited to go to a conference about complex trauma and what stress does to the brain.
The behavior isn't the kid. The behavior is a symptom of what's going on in their life.
My mom was like, get your shit and leave. She's the only thing I had. And for her to abandon me like that.
His coping mechanism was drinking a ton, smoking a ton.
I remember one night, I didn't want to be alive.
It hit me, and it hit me really hard.
You have to unconditionally love them, and you have to believe that their behavior might be out of their control.
I love playing guitar with several of these guys. I feel like that's almost as strong as anything we ever do in class.
After that, he wasn't only a discipline figure, he was a friend.
Half of the student's body had over a 3-point GPA. To watch their confidence come back has been incredible.
I'm not by myself anymore. I got a team.
If I can do it, all of you can definitely do it.
It's not that I'm judging you. I know why you're smoking weed. I know why you smoke meth. I know why you're in fights you don't want to feel. I mean, that's the big challenge is I'm asking you to try feeling for a little bit because sometimes when you feel, it guides you in the direction that you should be going and not to where you are.
So Lincoln, I came across when I was talking about resilience and the difficulty of going down this sort of hopeless track. When I turned around to say, well, what's really happening? Dr. Felitti, the co-author of the study, said, there's a high school up in Washington State that's doing some really interesting things and starting to. I've seen a few articles. So I went up to Walla Walla, Washington, and met with the principal. And within 10 minutes, I just was struck. And this is something, I think, whatever the movement is, whatever the cause is, there's a pattern that you see over time. Science confirms something, and it takes, there's a lag period between published science that supports a game-changing shift of perspective on an issue. And then it takes about 15 to 20 years for that science to catch up, for the culture to adapt, understand, and start to implement that science. And you see this across so many different things. So here we are with this study that came out in the mid-90s, and Jim Spoileder, meanwhile, was at the end of his rope, asked to come in and be the principal of an at-risk high school, alternative high school, with kids who are out of control. And it was so out of control that he was just desperate to feed. He said, we've got to change things up in a big way. And he'd come from 30 plus years of punitive based model education. He was a phys ed teacher and then an administrator, and done his share of expelling kids and being, sort of zero tolerance attitude. And he went to a conference and heard a presentation about ACEs, and it clicked, and he came home and said, all right, so if that science is true, what would I do differently? And it comes down to sort of three basic things at Lincoln High School. The first thing was just education for the entire staff and understanding if your students are hyper vigilant and reactive, what would you do differently? Because this is not something that's just a moral failing on their behalf. They are neurologically impaired. How do you change your relationship to acknowledge this dynamic on the neurological level? And it really comes down to sort of patience and de-escalation and making sure you don't bring your own baggage into a potential confrontation or a trigger. Because, as you saw in this, you see that people that work for the betterment of children, very often the story is that they're coming from personal experience. I mean, I'm not going to make any assumptions for anyone in this room, but my guess is there's a fair amount of you that ended up doing this work because you know firsthand what it means to not have support. And this trajectory you see all over the country, so folks that are coming from such a wonderful place in their hearts about doing good things for children, being in a reactive environment can be hard for them as well, particularly educators. So having them understand and say, look, we have to introduce sort of de-escalation measures. Kids are just removed for 15 minutes in the hallway or sent to chill out in the principal's office became like the chill room. And it wasn't like you're sent there, you're punished. It's like, just go, chill out, and then we're going to talk. And there are a lot of little details like that the teachers understand with the kids. Curiosity, not being afraid to give a hug or have some sort of hand, contact, eye contact. Historically, teachers have been encouraged to disengage with contact for all these good reasons in some ways, but we've now isolated ourselves from kids because we're worried about inappropriate things, which are a real worry, but at the same time, my wife's a teacher, she's been teaching for 30 years, and she realized very early on, I can't not have a comforting relationship with my students. And so they manage these gray areas really well, and they have honest connections with the kids. And one. Number two, they have a health center right next to the school. And this is what gets me excited about being here, because this is a trauma-informed, with San Mar in the midst, and its long history, by the way, it's an amazing history, it has naturally evolved. It's been trauma-informed for 100 years, Now there's a vocabulary for what they're doing. So this idea of bringing the community together to support the kids and it not being some vast bureaucratic bloated thing that's soulless. It's actually local community coming together. In Walla Walla, they raised the money to create the health center at the school, knowing full well that these kids, so many of the things that they're struggling with, they come into school, they've got all kinds of health issues that are unresolved and untreated. How can you expect them to learn when they're malnourished, undiagnosed, stressed out? So the health center was a big thing, and the kids really loved going there for counseling services, and sometimes just to hang out and talk. So, and that's aside from the basic primary care that they were getting. The third one is they stopped expelling kids. That doesn't mean that they gave up on discipline or accountability. They have in-school suspension at Lincoln, and so the kids, instead of being suspended, most of these kids, I would say, if I can make a gross generalization, if you say, all right, you're out, they're not going home to watch television and hang out with mom. They're on the streets. So what you're doing is you're sort of saying you're done. Your next stop is going to be with law enforcement, because that's what happens. So their idea was, wait a minute, and then, then they come back, or it's a mess. So anyway, the kids have in-school suspension, and they hate it. A lot of these kids want to be kicked out. They want to go smoke pot and skate, right? I mean, and so now they're told they have to stay, and grudgingly they end up in this study room, and they have to spend a week in a study room quietly getting work done. But what you see over time is that the person running the in-school suspension program and who's in the room every day has a meaningful relationship with the kids. She knows how to engage them. She brings them in from the edge. It starts out combative and grumpy. And I can't tell you how many times I came into that room and saw her, talking intimately and embracing and having a real connection with the kids. So those three things, in terms of the educational aspect of this, were, in my mind, the kinds of things that can be done and replicated. And what I've seen over the last 4 years since I first started working on this topic is this is growing. When I started, there were like just a few dozen schools that were trying to do this. Now, Partnership with Children in New York has similar programs in all throughout the public school system in New York City, and there's other ones as well. The Center for Youth Wellness, the California Endowment, all of these are really working to replicate this idea in the educational setting. One of the things I encountered pretty soon after finishing, so all that to say, once I went and did Paper Tigers first, because I had to understand the solutions and intuitively understand that. Then I came back to resilience and said, okay, I think I got it now. So that's why resilience came out afterwards. In some ways, it would have been better if it came out before, because it's more of a survey of the issue. But I don't know, didn't work that way. So anyway, so one of the things that I got when I finished Paper Tigers first, it didn't really make it as much into resilience as I would have preferred, given that we were really set on being only an hour long, is, what does it take to be trauma-informed? What does it really mean as an educator? And I think you can extrapolate outwards. What does it mean for any of you that are service providers to be trauma-informed and to, love and compassion, pretty soft words, and they go over pretty easily in Northern California, where I'm from, but I try not to use them too liberally. And but honestly, the things that's so healing and productive in trying to either prevent or help kids get through stress, it really does come down to these things. And a lot of teachers, I've heard discussions and with other public sector service providers, that it's asking a lot. And that it's easy, in some ways, if you're going to be in for the long haul, you need to create protective barriers for yourself, protect your emotions, be able to go home at the end of the day, and leave it behind you so you don't arrive back home with it. There are all of these, it's not easy work, and you all know this, and being more attuned or curious about kids and more available to them as a person as you're doing your work is really hard. And yet, what I found among a lot of people that I've talked to, whether they're in social work or pediatrics or educators, is they find that making that connection is actually in the long run easier than being pissed off all the time at kids. And that if you just show a little curiosity and go that route and go with I'm not gonna, I'm gonna be compassionate here, it's actually easier on you. And that's the science teacher in Paper Tigers, that was his mantra to me. And in his inimitable way, he's like, dude, I don't want to be pissed off all the time. I don't want to be pissed. I'd rather just give a shit. So, so speaking of him, I'm going to show the next clip because what I did afterwards is I said, let's have a little bit of a dialogue about what it really takes from the educational point of view. Let's get real about this. You and Jeannie, his colleague at Lincoln High, I met them in Seattle. I was in Seattle for a film festival, and I said, could you guys just come on? We'll bring you down. Let's film a little conversation about, let's get real about what it means to be a trauma-informed educator. So, Mr. Young Guy,
If I could wave my wand and just dink, change the way people view, is the idea that we're all just behavioral detectives, and we're just looking for the source. Why is this behavior the way it is?
The chromosomes, the DNA.
And in order to find that source of the behavior, you have to get to know the kid.
Right.
The slang term we use for it is the AC in a kid, but I think we both have a fairly similar way that we approach a kid when we meet them for the very first time. Hey, where are you from? Why are you here?
How'd you end up at our school?
And what other schools have you been to?
Do you live with your parents? Yeah.
Oh, so you only have one parent? Like, where's the other parent at? All of a sudden, they're just like, man, I'm having this real conversation. This person actually cared, and that's where that real connection happens.
Monday morning, every class, the entry task is, how are you? How was your weekend? Give me a high and a low. I'll get a paragraph where they launch into like, my dad went back to jail last night and I don't know where I'm gonna sleep tonight. So you start out reducing that stress for them right away because they've shared out, they feel better about that. Opens up a dialogue that I can quietly visit with them again. Are you okay? Do I need to connect you to something? We start to think about small things that make a huge difference. What would happen if every kid showed up and felt loved within a couple of days and they always had someone to talk to?
Like the kids at our school that are so disenchanted with their previous school experience, they're not disenchanted because they had too much homework at the other school. It's always a relationship experience that they've had. Always. That's fixable. That's fixable at every single school.
Right, because those kids are everywhere.
This thing about ACEs and trauma-informed, to see it start where it was and to watch it catch on and grow has just been awesome to watch.
So it's been an interesting it's been an interesting thing. It's been a real privilege to travel the country and go places I never would have had a chance to go, and meet so many different communities, and to see how these two films they have arrived at the right moment in time. I mean, there's a reason. Karen Pritzker, my partner. It got on her radar for a reason at the time that it did. Things build new ideas, new approaches, build a critical mass. And when they finally go, they really do tend to go. And this is the time. This is the time for ACEs. And this is the time as we begin to not think of the mind-body connection as a hippie 70s irritant, but rather science-based. I mean, the hippies were right. And so here we are, and we came along. We're as much a reflection of that moment of time. We certainly didn't create this. We just came along, and these films are here because the momentum was ramping up. But we've seen in the last 4 years some extraordinary things going on around the country in terms of how many schools and how many communities are taking this trauma-informed approach to what they're doing. Probably the biggest surprise to me, I'm a part-time resident of Utah. My mom was born and raised in Utah. That's where the Sundance Film Festival is, the Sundance Ski Resort that my family owns. And so Utah, there's a strong connection there. And I did a number of screenings in Utah over the last couple of years of both films. And last week I was in Sun Valley at the Sun Valley Film Festival, and the CEO of Zions Bank, a Utah-based bank, introduced, it was a different film. I'm doing a different film now, and I was there with a different film. He got up there to introduce me, and he said, you know, this work that Jamie did with Paper Tigers and Resilience in Utah, you know, we screened for the legislature in Utah, and as a result of the screenings, the state legislature decided to have sort of a toxic, stress-free, Utah is a toxic, stress-free state, and they allocated a good chunk of money to be distributed to the entities that are trauma-informed and doing the important work. I don't do that to brag. I didn't even know this. This is its own thing. It's the folks like you that take it and run with it. And I was just down in North Carolina a couple of weeks ago, and they're gearing up to have a screening for the legislature. And some of the legislators that were there were two hardcore rural Trump fans that were there, speaking passionately from their own experience, older gentlemen who had rough childhoods, and we got to spend money on this. So the reason I share this is that the potential to sort of head towards policy change and resource allocation is there. I've seen it in some other places too. So if you're thinking, you're feeling like okay, I understand this science, I get it, and I'm doing all this hard work, and it's really hard, but we don't have any money, you can do something about that, hopefully. It's happening in other places. So for those of you that are involved with policy change and lobbying and those sorts of things, it's not hopeless. So before I wrap up, I wanted to show one last clip because I think it's important to remember that I know that there are a lot of disappointments. I mean, even in Paper Tigers, we featured 5-6 kids. Most of them have done very well, but some of them they continue to struggle. And it's the reality. I mean, we all know this. It's not happy ending always. But as you folks know, there are often those kids that make you feel like, oh boy, this is worth it, So I just wanted, for me as a filmmaker, I wanted to share my version of that with you to cap things off today. Oops, sorry, stop. Next one.
Do an impulsive movement. Okay, look at my phone and do like a weird
You mentioned Walla and Paper Tigers about following up with the people who you presented in that first film, and about kind of what's going on with them.
Well, nice segue, because I'd like to bring someone up. Kelsey, where are you? You're here somewhere, aren't you? So why don't you frame up, like, where were you at, before you came to Lincoln? What was going on in your life, just roughly?
So most kids that end up at Lincoln were either kicked out of the local high school, or they were referred there by their teachers. So most of the kids that were at Lincoln already didn't want to be at Lincoln.
Trevor, Oliver, yes. Kelsey,
I smoked a lot of weed, drank a lot, ran away a lot, partied a lot. And I skipped like 3 months of school. If you take an example of a kid who is constantly ditching school and a teacher says to them, well, glad to see you finally showed up, versus, what's been happening? Like, why haven't you been here? We've missed you. Where have you been? Like, that's spore leader, like, in and of itself, is because his main concern is that, first and foremost, you're okay. And then we address, why haven't you been coming to school? What's going on? What can I do to help make it easier for you to get here? Do you need gas money? I mean, what's going on at home? Because if someone had did that for me when I was in elementary school, when, some days I'd come to school with my hair done nice and, fresh clothes, and then the next day my mom couldn't even get out of bed to take me. It's like nobody was asking those questions. Nobody was asking, why isn't she coming to school? Why is she here some days and not? It was good. It was good for me. It opened my eyes a lot. Now that I'm a senior, I look back on it and think I needed the one-on-one time with teachers. And I've grown and I've found myself inside of Lincoln. And I don't think I would have been where I'm at today if I hadn't gone there.
Here's an example. Somebody looks at you and you're like, what? And then you realize they were looking at someone behind you. It wasn't even you. Has that ever happened?
I think after learning about ACEs and learning about why kids act the way that they do, I've made those connections. And it doesn't give me a reason to be, a crazy jealous person who, it doesn't give me a right to be insecure and worried about those things, but it does make sense as to why I feel the way that I do. And I think getting those answers allows you to step into the right direction to fix it, to change it, to say, hey, I have this problem. I get extremely jealous. I'm worried about being alone. But I do have people who care about me. I know what's wrong with me, so now what can I do to fix it? Who can I talk to about it? And what can I learn from this? Hi, Mommy. More than anything, that gives me control that I feel like I've kind of longed for a really long time. If I look at it in a sense of I have complete control over my grades, so I'm going to get that A, and I'm going to strive for that A. But it's just funny to reflect on, that freshman because, I would have been happy with a D because at least that's passing. And I was given a second opportunity, and I was cared for, and I was listened to, and more than anything, it's funny now to reflect, and I think that I'm ready to move on to bigger and better things.
Here we are, 3 years later, 4 years later. You've graduated already. You're going to walk with Lincoln?
Yeah, I'm going to walk. Yeah.
So you're going to walk, but you were doing so well that you started taking college courses, right?
At the beginning of this year.
Well, speaking of your kick-ass academic ability, we have something for you.
This is a scholarship of public service with high honors to Kelsey Sisavath.
Being in pediatrics, I've been thinking about it a lot and working with babies and kids, and having that knowledge about ACEs and about trauma it makes me so much more excited for what my future can hold and how I can impact people's lives. I don't really know what will happen from this point, but I'm excited and I'm ready.
She's awesome. She's continuing to do very well in college and working hard. So I think we're just about up. I wanted to mention, if you're like, oh, how do I find materials, or how do you, what are my resources to apply in the real world? Our website, kpgrfilms.co, and it's so annoying that we couldn't be .com. And we wanted to buy it, and then the person that owns it won't even disclose who they are. We can't even, here I am with a support from a philanthropist, and they won't even open the door to a discussion about buying this website that's not used. Someone owns it. So instead, we look like we're from the country of Colombia, but we're not. We're American. But on that website, you'll find all kinds of resources there's a program called The Heart of the Matter. There's the social media outreach with our hashtags on the website is phenomenal. There's a spiritual guide, educator's guide, and I think the versions of the film that are available online now come with added, goodies for people that are actually trying to bring this stuff out. So there you have it. And again, I just want to say, keep up the important work that you do. And I think what's happening here in Hagerstown with it being a community, you've got the support of a really strong community. And a lot, some other places I've been, the folks are really trying to do hard work, but they're sort of isolated a little bit and it hasn't evolved. And you have this long, long history. That's what I love about the East, actually. It just tends to be more of an on-ramp to a lot of good things that people are trying to do. And so you have this here, and it's a reflection of all of you, and I just applaud all the hard work you're doing. Best of luck to you. Thank you.